we're exploring the concepts of independence, autonomy, inclusion, and I suppose we felt that this was an area that we hadn't addressed maybe publicly. We're dealing with it, day in, day out. We work with great organisations like St Michael's House, the Irish Wheelchair Association and others, but just something that we hadn't explored in a public forum. So we're delighted to do it this evening, and there's a lot happening in that space at the moment as well, with, of course, the publication of the National Housing Strategy for Disabled People in 2022, and we'll hear more on that from Pam McCarthy later from the Housing Agency.
Is the Minister here? Did you ask?
We did ask the Minister. He's not available tonight, unfortunately. So as you can see in the programme, we have a fantastic lineup of speakers and panellists. We have a range of housing practitioners, disability services organisations and some of our own disabled residents, and we're delighted to welcome so many of you here this evening. I know there's people from other approved housing bodies, the Department of Housing, the Housing Agency, and colleagues, family and friends of Simon, so we really appreciate you all coming. Just a quick note on language, as you might have noticed in the programme, we use the term disabled people ourselves during the lecture this evening. This is in line with the social model of disability, so the idea that people are disabled by the environment within which they interact, as opposed to it being a kind of an individualised concept. So it's something that we I suppose thought was appropriate, and something that's actually used in the strategy itself. But of course, you might hear different terms throughout the lecture. We leave it up to people as to what term they feel to be most appropriate and relevant. Quick note on housekeeping. So we've accessible toilets outside the room and around the corner towards the entrance of the building. And while we won't be taking a break, we do hope to have the chance to mingle again after the lecture if there's any wine left. So do hang on. And finally, we have apologies from Clúid's CEO, Brian O'Gorman. He's attending an event tonight honouring his late wife, Anne Murphy. We all know that Brian would have loved to have been here, and he's very sorry to miss it. So just wanted to mention that. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome Clúid's Chief Commercial Officer, Eileen O'Connor, to take the stage. Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona. So I'll just tell you a little bit about Simon and talk a little bit about my own experience around housing and for disabled people. So Simon is a former board member of Clúid, and he chaired our board for many years, and he later became the head of policy with Clúid. So he was much loved. I myself actually learned an awful lot about social housing from Simon. He was a keen advocate of social and affordable housing in Ireland, and over the decades of work in the sector, he dedicated, his life's work to homelessness and his belief in the importance in the provision of high quality and affordable and secure homes for people, and that was a source of inspiration for many, and in particular for me. Simon worked tirelessly to break the stigma attached to social housing, something I learnt coming into Clúid, not knowing what social housing was. Simon was a great help to me in understanding that. I suppose he lobbied government, politicians, and put a case forward that social and affordable housing should be prioritised and adequately supported, and ultimately striving for a future where everyone in this state has a great place to live. So this year's lecture, as Fiona said, we will examine the topics of disability and housing, in particular the emphasis on the concepts of independence, independent living, autonomy, and inclusion in local communities. From the speakers and the panel members, and yourselves here in the room tonight, we will attempt to gain insights into the experience of housing for disabled people. And together, we're going to tackle some of the housing dilemmas and some key questions. So for example, what is the ideal housing for disabled people? Now that's not an easy question to answer, but we'll attempt to answer it tonight. everybody has different abilities and disabilities. I myself am an architect, that's my trade. Haven't worked as an architect for a while, but I've seen firsthand how unsuitable housing can be. And I know that because I've designed some of that housing myself, I'm ashamed to say. As a young architect, I would have complied with all the statutory guidance, all the regulations and good codes of practice. But those houses would still not have been suitable for everyone. So of course this was without the benefit of working or the experience of working with organisations like the Irish Wheelchair Association, the National Disability Authority, St Michael's House, and lots of other organisations who have the expertise and can guide people like me, and I think Nicola is going to give us an insight into that tonight, just on how to design better housing. I suppose later in my career in Clúid, I was working as an architect, and I had the privilege of working closely, I suppose, through engagement with local authorities. I worked with occupational therapists, the HSC occupational therapists, directly with them, really early on in the process. We were very lucky to be able to do that. It doesn't happen with all local authorities, and it doesn't always happen with even the same local authorities. So we were just lucky that we knew who the end user was when we were designing and developing the housing. So those people came directly from the social housing list, and we got to meet them in advance of, I suppose, designing and developing the houses. And they later became Clúid residents. So the difference that made to the resident was huge, because you had a fit-for-purpose house that met their needs from the very get-go, the minute you handed the keys over to them. Unfortunately, as I say, it doesn't always happen, and I think we can look at ways of doing better. So can approved housing bodies and local authorities work more effectively to ensure access to high-quality housing? And can we enable the creation of vibrant communities inclusive of households with disabled people? The answer is yes, I think we can. Collaboration is key. Early engagement is key. Knowing who the end user is key. So we will hear tonight about how, I suppose, we're progressing through the National Housing Strategy for Disabled People, and how that is impacting our planning and development process. So I think AHBs like Clúid are willing and able, and we have the expertise, and we can play our part in delivering that strategy. So I'd like you to keep a question to the forefront of your mind tonight when you're listening to the presentations and the panel discussion. This particular question: how can the provision of housing foster real independence, autonomy, and an inclusion in the community for disabled people? I hope at the end of the event tonight that we'll have some good suggestions, some actions, and answers to that question. So given Simon's passion for the arts and culture, that's a passion I share myself, we are delighted to host this event in this beautiful space and this beautiful building, the Royal Hibernian Academy of Arts. So we welcome you all, family, friends, colleagues, and indeed all of those who didn't know Simon personally, didn't have an opportunity to work with him, but who share his interests and his passion, and remembering and honouring Simon's legacy here tonight. So thank you.
Great, thanks very much, Eileen. Really appreciate that. And yeah, really fitting opening to the lecture this evening. Next up, we're going to hear from Anna Husef. So Anna was married to Simon. They met in England in the early 80s when they were both working for the Serenians, an NGO for homeless people. And Anna worked for RTE for a number of years as a producer and director, and now she's a really well-regarded novelist, particularly in Irish, for adults and young teens. So Anna, welcome you to the floor. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fiona and Eileen, and everybody who's spending a sunny evening in here, and it might be the last we get, but it might not be, of course. So in 2019, Simon was retiring from his job as head of policy at Clwyd, the same job that Fiona has followed him in, and he was absolutely delighted about Fiona getting the job. But Simon became ill with cancer, and it soon turned out to be terminal. In his last weeks in the hospice in that autumn, he certainly had no notion in his head that 5 years later, 150 people would register for a sold-out event in his name. And if I suggested such an idea, he would have told me I was losing my marbles. But if he had been able to imagine it, he would have been hugely pleased that this annual event is about bringing people together to share policy ideas, because that was a kind of driving idea, wish of his in all his work. And just as Eileen said, it's great that people from so many different sectors, from housing and disability rights and maybe other sectors, are here, and people maybe who hadn't heard of Simon at all until this event. So I'd like to just give a brief sense, to add to what Eileen said already, of who Simon was and how tonight's theme reflects his values. He was English, as Eileen said, and he moved to Ireland in his 30s, eventually becoming an Irish citizen as well as an English citizen, and in fact a moderately fluent Irish-speaking Irish citizen, because he took the time to make that effort. He found it quite hard work, but a lot of fun as well. He spent most of his adult life as a homelessness and housing campaigner, strategist, editor, researcher, consultant, lecturer, media commentator, and chairperson of Clwyd's board as well, as was mentioned before he applied for the policy job. His fundamental beliefs were in the equality of every human being, and that seems so simple and yet so profound and so disregarded and trampled on in so many places and parts of the world. So backing and believing in backing that equality with legally enforceable rights that give everyone the opportunity of a good life, economically, socially, culturally, sustainably, in which the daily pain and humiliations of marginalisation and poverty and the parallel obscenities of tiny minorities who enjoy vast wealth and privilege are ended. And of course, we all know that's a tall order, to say the least. And it's easy to sit back and say, sure, it's impossible. But some change for the better does happen. And Simon always wanted to celebrate that as well. Drip, drip, drip was one of his sayings about campaigning and working. Water dripping on a stone. Sometimes the stone crumbles over a long period of time, and sometimes it's suddenly dislodged and an overnight success after about 20 years of hard work, as so many of you here know in lots of different areas of life. I know that equality is the starting point for the independent living movement of Ireland, and we'll be hearing from a lot more about that shortly. And of course, it isn't a them and us discussion in any way, because mine and anybody's abilities, capabilities today could be my disabilities tomorrow due to illness, accident, age, or for whatever other reason. And maybe of the many, many forms of inequality around us, those based on disability are the most likely to directly affect any of us. Now I'm going to introduce a lighter note, because as some of you know very well with Simon, there was always a lighter note too. First, I'm going to admit that some of what I said about equality just now and Simon's beliefs in them is almost word for word what I said 2 years ago, as I discovered when I looked back at my notes at the lecture 2 years ago. So I'm not going to ask for a law of a source who actually spotted that. I'm also going to repeat one of Simon's stories from his very first housing job at an advice centre in London called Threshold, which wasn't related to the Threshold organisation here. After a few months working there, Simon realised that among the staff group of 8 or 10 people, he had the most privileged background because he was male, white, heterosexual, middle class, able-bodied. And in left-wing London campaigning circles, that was a rather worrying state of affairs because you didn't want to be the most privileged person in the group. And then he thought, aha, but I have an oppression all of my own because as a small man at 5'2.5" or thereabouts, I suffer from sizeism. So that was his consolation to himself. To go back to the independent living movement, I worked, as was mentioned, in RTE radio and television for many years. And in 2001, as a television producer, at the end of 2000, I think, I made a half-hour documentary for the Laergus series. It was a documentary series with Martin Naughton, who, for decades until his death in 2016, was a pioneering leader in spreading the radical idea that instead of being shut away and confined in institutions, as he had spent a lot of his childhood, everyone with a disability has the right to have personal assistance service and other supports to enable them to live as independent adults. Martin was from Spiddle and Spiddale in the Connemara Gaeltacht, and the programme was mainly in Irish with English subtitles. We spent 3 days, myself, the reporter and the crew, with himself and one of his, and a couple of colleagues and friends, and one of his personal assistants, Boris, who was a young man from Bosnia. I remember really well, and as soon as I thought of this, I could remember it, a few of the scenes we filmed, with Boris very gently putting on Martin's socks and shoes in the morning and combing his long hair while they chatted and putting on this hat his kind of trademark hat that he always wore. And I can see people nodding here who knew him. And the dignity of those ordinary activities combined with Martin's ferocious commitment to change and the mischievous twinkle in his eyes really stayed with me. Years after that programme, in the course, and I'll be finishing on this, in the course of some research, Simon met Martin a few times and he told me how much he admired Martin's campaigning style and achievements. Their lives were, of course, very, very different because, for a start, Martin had huge abilities and inner resources to enable him to overcome so many obstacles that he faced from childhood. But it occurred to me this week that they had some things in common, including always, and Martin talked about this in the programme, always focusing on the solutions you're after rather than just the problems, and always working on bringing people with you rather than turning them against you. And they both had that mischievous twinkle in their eyes. They both died in their 60s while they still had a lot of living to do, and I'm very sure that Martin is greatly missed, as Simon is. Gormila Mahagav. Oh, and sorry, I'll also just mention James, who's about to speak shortly. I was in contact with him yesterday, and he mentioned to me, I'd seen online this book, a memoir of Martin Naughton's, that was published only this year, and James arrived this evening and gave me a copy of it called Never Know Your Place, which seems a great title. So Gormila Mahagav.
Thanks so much, Anna. I definitely didn't notice that you had repeated your entire speech. So, really fitting tribute to Simon and amusing, as always. So thanks so much. And we really appreciate yourself and Connell's involvement in the lecture every year. It's fantastic. So now it gives me great pleasure to introduce the winner of the Simon Brooke Award. So you might have heard about this. We award this every year. Previously we looked at essays, now we're looking at projects. So it recognises excellence in the housing policy space, which contribute to Clúid's vision of a society where everyone has a great place to live. Previous winners have included Sinead Gaughan and Sarah Kennedy. This year, alongside some of Simon's former colleagues and friends, John McCafferty and Aidan Colleen, I think Aidan is here, we've selected St Michael's House as the awardee. They do know this, they're in the room. St Michael's House provides a range of services and supports to disabled people and their families to 170 locations in the Greater Dublin area. Their project, which they'll present to you now, demonstrated a real ingenuity, I suppose, in terms of putting the disabled person at the centre of what they do and kind of really meeting the person where they're at, as opposed to taking a kind of a one-size-fits-all approach to disabilities. So really, really inspiring. So I'm delighted to welcome Isolde Beld and Maeve Mulryan to present their project. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. So it was a great honour to win the Simon Brooke Award. I didn't know him personally, but it was fantastic to hear about him, and it makes it even more the better that I won it after knowing so much, or you sharing so much about him. I also think it's a lovely way to be able to keep someone's memory alive by naming an award after someone, and like I said, it was a privilege to win it, from what you've said, Anna, especially with his inclusivity regarding housing in Ireland. So it's with great pleasure that I get to introduce my case study, which was the winning submission, Ireland's first water mist system installed in a community residential ID setting. And I need to press it, sorry, as I'm expecting someone else to do it for me. So, my name is Isolde Beld, and I'm the Fire Prevention Officer for St Michael's House. So, what I'm going to do with you this evening is I'm going to pretty much bring you through a quick overview of the challenge that faced us, the solution and why it was deemed suitable. I'm slightly going to digress a little bit, but I feel it's appropriate given the topic of the evening, some common fire evacuation issues that I face day to day. And then I'm going to conclude the case study. I'm then going to hand you over to my colleague, Maeve Mulryan. She's going to explain our community support service, the Horizons project that she's leading out on, and then she's going to bring our presentation to a close. So, let me introduce you to Alex. That, of course, is not his real name, and that is not the person, just in case anyone's wondering. So, Alex is in his 70s. He's lived successfully, independently, and helped by our community support team to do so. However, over the last number of years, Alex has experienced some changes. He does live in a St Michael's House property, which has all the active and passive fire measures that you come to expect in a property of this type. However, as you can see in the table there, Alex outlined with just a few fire risk issues. This is the reason why the key worker, manager, and the remaining multidisciplinary team came to me and asked me for advice. Can you provide a potential solution that might reduce the risk? As you can see, Alex didn't have many housing options. He could have moved to one of our community-based residential houses. He'd have to live with up to 5 other people. He didn't want that. He could have also moved to a nursing home. He did not want that either. What Alex wanted was to continue to live in his own home. That was his will and preference, and something that he communicated to his key worker and manager. Now, that presented a great challenge to us, but it did provide a very clear brief. We needed to provide a safer environment for Alex to continue to live in his home. However, we needed to reduce the fire risk to as low as reasonably practicable. But the intervention needed to be proportional to the fire risk that he presented. We had numerous meetings, we discussed numerous options, which we trialled, some to a limited success. However, I needed to think of a more robust solution in order to be able to allow Alex to continue to live in his own home. So, when I started down the path of exploring domestic water mist systems or sprinkler systems, they aren't commonplace in Ireland. I am excluding Northern Ireland. It was extremely difficult for me to find a company that would return my call or email, and when they did, after much chasing, the cost was too prohibitive. Perhaps too small a job in the grand scheme of things. However, I came up with a brainwave. I said, I'll contact our fire extinguisher contractor. I explained the challenge that I faced, and thankfully they had a solution. They advised a plumbous water mist system. They felt this would be the best option, given the factors and the person involved. There was also examples of it being used in similar type of facilities in Northern Ireland, where it enhanced the existing fire protection measures in place. The table outlines some of the reasons, or additional reasons, as to why it was chosen. It was a diversion from the norm, but I believe it was warranted given the foreseeable risk that Alex presented. So, as I said to you earlier, I am going to slightly digress for one moment. I have some thematic challenges that I experience. I feel, like I said earlier, they're relevant given the topic of this evening. And I don't want to speak on other service providers' behalf, but I would imagine the following challenges aren't too dissimilar. The primary one is changing needs. This is due to ageing or medical-related issues. There's also a limitation to what our community-based dwellings can provide. And we've hit this limitation in relation to some of our two-storey properties that we have. And lastly, and this is probably one of the most important ones from my context in what I do in St Michael's House, is the importance of regular staffing. That's not always possible. In this instance, I believe fire evacuation plans need to be simple to explain, to understand, and to implement. So to put this into context, if a fire incident happens, you only get one chance to get it right. So, back to my case study. In my opinion, and it's something I included in my submission, the reason why we were successful was we had a clear, shared goal. We worked very well together as a team, and we had an appetite to deliver for Alex. We had several great external contractors and our internal plumbers and our technical services manager who delivered on its installation. This would not have been successful if we didn't have buy-in from all these key stakeholders, including the relevant levels of management. I do think this case study is a great example of St Michael's House mission, vision and values at work. So what do we need? St Michael's House knows how to provide services. However, we need suitable housing options. And this is to support the transitional life changes which we may experience. What you might not know is that those with an intellectual disability experience those transitional life changes earlier than the general population. So, having a variety of housing options within the housing stock and supply that can cater to these changing needs allows St Michael's House and other service providers similar to ourselves to continue to provide safe, high-quality services. Lastly, I'm going to shamelessly thank the relevant contractors that were involved in delivering on this project and our own internal maintenance team as well. So that's my section of the presentation finished, and I'm going to now hand you over to Maeve Mulryan, who's going to explain the rest.
Hi everyone, my name is Maeve Mulryan and I'm a social care worker with St Michael's House. I work the Community Support Services and coordinate the Horizons project. Community support is a service model that fully supports people to live as independently as possible. We support 38 people to live in their own homes. We have a staff team of 10 social care workers, a mix of full-time and part-time over 7 days a week. Some of the supports offers include practical supports for everyday living, assisting the person to manage their own home, encourage daily, weekly routines, cooking, household chores, and attend their job or day service. With money management, we offer support to manage the weekly income, advice on best options to pay bills, direct debit or maybe going to the post office, saving plans, seek value for money with service providers through for their gas and electricity. Promoting physical and mental health well-being, encourage healthy lifestyles, promote good practice of regular exercise and self-care, and attend medical appointments and take prescribed medications. Inform the person that they are fully aware of what entitlements are out there and how to apply for relevant support, such as living alone allowance, fuel allowance. And we also meet regularly for regular support meetings that could take place in a person's home or community. Our age profile ranges from 40 to 65 years, and a number of people are living independently for over 20 years in community support assistance. Some of the current and future challenges include physical health can deteriorate, and there may be need for additional support to manage illness or new diagnoses. Mental health, increased stress levels to deal with coping with change and worries about the future, and also dealing with grief after a parent or family member dies. The ageing process can lead to a reduced circle of support. Family members move away, or a person may retire from work or their day service. This can lead to loneliness. There's a strong will and preference to continue to live independently. As Adalza's case study shows, highlighted, we need to look at all options available to people to facilitate this in a safe environment. Vulnerabilities within the community include antisocial behaviour. Witnessing antisocial behaviour in their area can cause stress and concern for a person's own personal safety, and their vulnerability in the community. They can fall risk to scamming like us all, but this can also lead to people placing trust in new friends, but it doesn't end very well. The current housing at St Michael's House, we have 16 properties in 4 different locations. The tenants rent from various housing bodies, including Ivy Trust, Hale and DCC, and some continue to live in the family residence when parents pass away. The last big housing allocation we received was in 2007. 9 people were provided with new housing, and then there was an application process open for people to apply for the properties, and it presented a new opportunity for couples to live together, and training was provided to support independent living. Following on from this, the Horizons project was deemed through one of St Michael's House strategic plan to set up an independent living programme and help people plan for the future. There's a large number of adults attending St Michael's House day services who live at home with their parents, and they don't have regular access to respite or breaks away. They would like an opportunity to increase their independence and build on their capacities. The Horizons project offers individuals the chance to take positive risks, take on more responsibility, and learn and practice new skills, and give a chance to think about what they'd like for the future. Learning is reflective of real life and encourages conversations about what life could be like if they decide to live independently on their own or with friends. Building capacities can help reduce the reliance on full-time residential supports in the future. To date, we have 50 service users have engaged in the Horizons project. The age range is from 18 to 52 years. Participants are living at home with ageing parents and are confident to travel independently and keen to explore future living options. The main aims of Horizons are there on the screen, and we have a short video we'd like to play just to explain it a little bit more from the people who participated. It was a synopsis of people's participation. We focused on education, practical skills. We have access to a training apartment, and the service users then use that to act out real life. They spend some time in the training apartment with their practical skills, and some people then have built up confidence to stay overnight without staff support, so like an independent respite, and it gives them a taste of what it is like to spend time living on your own. And also then with education, we've linked with Northside Partnership, and they've very kindly worked closely with us to work out on Money Makes Sense programs and deliver training in a 1-to-1 or 1-to-3 group relating to practical skills that the people, how to manage their own money. And we've also worked closely with our psychology department and delivered workshops. We're focusing on coping skills, assertiveness and problem solving. So just to conclude then, we really believe proactive planning is key. We believe engaging with service users and their families from an early age, from when they turn 18, transitioning from child to adult services. We believe it's also important that we manage service users and families' expectations. There are long housing lists. From our own experience, people are a minimum 10 years on the housing list. And for us then to pass on the knowledge to inform families about relevant forms and service uses, different areas, and choice-based letting. And just to conclude, we just believe that the pathway to independence, by filling in the application forms, this helps identify potential numbers of people who require future housing. Okay, sorry about the video, it didn't work, but...
So just to say congratulations again to Azalde and Maeve for their project, the awardee of the Simon Brooke Award this evening. And we really appreciate you getting involved and yeah, I suppose joining the discussion this evening. So next up we have a presentation from James Casey. So James Casey is a disability activist and the recently appointed Disability Inclusive Climate Justice Lead with CBM Ireland. He previously worked for the disabled persons organisation Independent Living Movement Ireland, and that's kind of where myself and Andrew Daly, my colleague, have got to know him. We've been involved in a couple of projects in recent months on allocation of housing to disabled people. So James, welcome you to the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. No, it's not, miracles only happen in Lourdes, but I'll put that there. You'll see me getting up and getting down throughout the day. But firstly, I'd like to say thank you so much for being invited today. It's a real privilege. And when I was working with ILMI, and you know, ILMI is part of my blood. Some people think it's a bit of a cult, but it's not really. It's a collective disabled persons organisation, which is like a union of disabled people. I think it's important to kind of frame that, how we think about these ideas. But I remember when I was talking to Andrew and Fiona, the kind of impact that it had amongst us, that we were invited to speak at this Cluage event, and how much that meant to us. Because as disabled people, we're often ignored from these spaces, you know, and we're omitted from them. There's a whole part of being presented but not being represented, and that was something we were very conscious about. So it really does mean a lot to us. And Simon was such a pioneer of inclusivity in the space. I don't have a very elaborate PowerPoint presentation today because I don't know how to use it. So I've got a very small one. I didn't do any of this fancy stuff here or anything like that. And what do I press, Fiona? The green one? The green one, lovely. Look, oh. So I've only got, that's it. That's about the extent of it. So I think really what we're talking about today is consultation, co-creation, and co-implementation. So how do you build an inclusive community? Well, you build an inclusive community by being inclusive. You build an inclusive community by bringing, you know, people of all sections of society into community, and that's by having people in the community, and you build them around that. But to get to those steps, it can be quite difficult. It can be quite, you know, hard to go, you know, Jesus, there's so much going on here. There's a lot of noise. Who do I talk to? What do I talk to? Who do I listen to? It was wonderful to listen to when you're talking about as an architect and you started with Cluage years ago. And I remember talking to one of you guys. There was a thing that, for instance, the councils don't, right, a disabled person's allocation of a house in Cluage, whatever, an AHB, they don't know what, they don't know. The council don't tell you. And they're like, we won't put you in touch with you. So how you spend millions of putting, not millions, hundreds, thousands putting in like assistive technology, and then you've got to rip it all out. Yeah. So the communication there at that very point breaks down. So there's a failure there, and it's a simple thing where if they talk to you and they talk to the disabled person or disabled person's organisation, then that would alleviate that symptom. That would the solution base, because it is all about solutions. So the first one I have here is DPOs are the authentic conduit of agency for disabled people. That's quite fancy with language. It just means that this DPOs, the only interest they have is speaking for disabled people, collective empowerment. If you want to find out about, you know, women's rights, I'm going to go to the National Women's Council. I'm going to go to women's groups. If I want to find out about football, I was going to say don't talk to Mayo, but because I'm from Mayo. But you'd find out about something. I was in Croke Park a few weeks ago. I was at a social inclusion forum, and the taxi driver says to me when he's driving me up there, he says, where are you going? I says, Croke Park. He says, all right. He says, where are you from? I says, Mayo. He says, what are you going up here for, a Garth Brooke concert or something? I was like, thanks, man, cheers. I did try to get tickets for Garth Brooks. I couldn't get them. So When you talk to DPOs, more often than not, there's a network of DPOs around the country, so you get that local knowledge. And DPOs also will engage with this lovely word, I was talking to Pat Carthy about this, HDSGs, which is the Housing Disability Steering Groups in a local area. And they can influence that, and that's how change happens from the ground up. So the conduit of knowledge. But when you're given accurate, objective data, then you can plan. You can think about, right, what do we need to do? Do we need to put this house in here? Is that a good spot for it? Sometimes in the best place in the world, social housing could go. And it's not just about social housing, it's about affordable housing too, because there's an assumption that disabled people are all at a level of poverty. There's not. There's a lot of young people who are well educated, middle class, much better behaved than I am, and you know, coming from a better background than I am. And they're at that level where they can't get a house at all. They can't afford to, because of the cost of disability, they can't afford to rent privately, but they can't access social housing because they're above the threshold. So it's a catch-22 situation. And I know that has been addressed in the National Housing Plan or Strategy for Disabled People, but it's just another thing. Communication. This is key. I was away a few weeks ago. I was in Kenya, and I looked at YouTube, and up pops a video from the new the housing authority about how to apply for housing, the independence videos. I thought, this is lovely. They're really good. I know a couple of people in them, and if you've seen them, it's about every disabled person should apply for housing. Go through your council. Mainstream, it's the way. And it's communication about how to apply, making that process easier, making it simple, making it effective. And then, I suppose the bigger the plan, the tougher it is to show real change. That can be tough. I mean, if you've got 190 actions in a plan, that's huge. That's massive. But, however, the National Housing Strategy for Disabled People is a wonderful example of a co-created document that's co-implemented with disabled people themselves. So if it's a massive document, that's fine, that's grand. We'll see if it checks off these boxes, but it's still a very good, useful enterprise in showing what co-creation can achieve. And this is a little thing, I suppose, I wanted to talk about here, is independence versus self-determination. And I think that's really what we're talking about when we talk about independence. There's this idea, when I know I look 21, but I'm actually not, I'm quite middle-aged, but when I started, there was this idea of living alone. Independence is living alone. It's not. Nobody lives alone. I mean, you know, God forbid they do, but it's about making your own decisions. And independence is not just, you know, having your house plonked in an area and not being part of that community. That's not independence either. So what we're really talking about is self-determination. What we're really talking about, choice is fine, but choice is arbitrary. Choice is saying you can have a banana or an apple and saying, I don't want either, you know. I want a pineapple. You know, I want a pint of Guinness. It's about making your decisions and having the, I suppose, capacity to act. It's not mental capacity or physical capacity. It's having the freedom to say, this is my choice and I'm going to make it outside of the choices I'm given. And that's something disabled people are often lacking. We're given choices, but we're never given the option to be self-determined. And that's what it's really about. And when it comes to homes and when it comes to housing, that indeed is the ultimate form of self-determination. It's something we've all went through. When I first left home many years ago in the 90s, I lived in a wonderful series of converted garages and bedsits. And these were wheelchair accessible back, well, they weren't, but you know, but you had the option to be self-determined. You had the option to make your own mistakes. I mean, the amount of times I've left on the immersion overnight. It wasn't even, actually I have an immersion now that you can turn on with Wi-Fi at home. Have you seen that one? So I like to call it my postmodern immersion. And I'll turn it on even though I'm right beside it. I'll use the app. And I think that's it though. It's the fact that we can be self-determined. But to be self-determined, then you need to be able to do that. There needs to be supporters. And it was wonderful what Anna was saying there. And I was delighted that she got in touch with email about Simon and about Merton Naughton and all that. It's not doing things for yourself. It's not doing things, you know, appearing to live alone. It's about being part of our communities. Where no man is an island. I think it was Alexander Pope. It was probably from the Bible. I don't know. And that in itself is it, because bit by bit by bit, like Martin said and like Simon said, you bring people along. You bring people with you. And it's bringing everyone up together, or nobody's coming up together. And I think too, there's a little saying, I'll go on to the last slide here. If you point your camera at that, you'll find out more information than I can ever give you, with a wealth of information on housing, on collective movements, on terms, on conditions. This goes to the Independent Living Movement Ireland's website. They have a wonderful, I'm not attached to them anymore, disclaimer, I can, I'm speaking as an individual. But the thing with them is that we always try to do stuff for doing the right thing. We never try to do anything unless we felt everybody was with us and we had the mandate from disabled people. That's what we try to do. Collectively, collectively, collectively. And my own new job now, I work in the Global South, and I see the collective movements of disabled people in East Africa and Asia, and they may be resource poor, but I'll tell you something, these guys are policy rich. They've got such a collective movement and such a history going back to the 70s. Whereas in this country, it's relatively new to us, but we're getting there. And there's a lovely saying in the disability rights movement, and indeed many rights movements. I heard it recently, and it's nothing about us without us. I think actually even you, Caroline, said it recently too. But that's not it anymore. It's not nothing about us without us. It's nothing without us. Nothing without us.
Yeah.
So thank you, folks. I really appreciate it. And I'm sorry for my immersion story. But I never thought, I bet you never thought you'd be hearing a postmodern immersion on a Thursday night in Dublin. I didn't think I'd say it. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thanks so much, James. That was exactly what I thought it would be, given you only had 3 slides. So yeah, we really appreciated the interaction, and I think it really touched on a lot of the points that we wanted to kind of get across in this lecture this evening. That, you know, we don't just stop at housing. You need to look at the actual community that people are living in to create a really inclusive society for everyone, and disabled people as well. So next up we have Pa McCarthy. So Pa is Head of Local Authority Services with the Housing Agency. The Housing Agency is a government body working with the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage, and approved housing bodies in the delivery of housing and housing services across Ireland. Pa is in his current role since July 2023. He's held numerous roles in the Housing Agency since joining back in 2015. And the Local Authority Services team has a really central role in the implementation of the National Housing Strategy for Disabled People. So Pa, I'd like to invite you to the floor. Yeah, great stuff.
Thanks very much, Fiona. Like everyone, it's a real honour to be here. I'll just tell you from the off, it's going to be nowhere near as entertaining as James's presentation, but bear with me. Okay, so the National Housing Strategy for Disabled People was launched in January 2022. And following on from that, a key aspect of it is the implementation plan, which James alluded to. 107 actions, James, not 190, but it is very significant. And it sets out the future plan for housing for disabled people over a 5-year period. As part of developing the strategy, the Housing Agency carried out an extensive consultation process. And I suppose we believe that in doing that and hearing the voice of disabled people, we've come up with a strategy and an implementation plan that will really make progress. So the overarching principle of it is living independently and being included in the community. There are 6 themes under the strategy: accessible housing and community, interagency collaboration and the provision of supports, affordability of housing, communication and access to information, knowledge, capacity and expertise, and strategy alignment. Here you go, this is the implementation plan. So it's organised under the 6 different teams. There are various outcomes that are called out as part of those teams, and then there are actions that are required in order to get to the outcome and make the progress we need to make. Just to say, there's a review of the implementation plan happening at the back end of this year. It's obviously important to keep on top of that, just to make sure that our actions are appropriate, that they're being achieved, and that they're well understood. I suppose just some learnings from the approach to the development of the strategy. as James mentioned, like this, I certainly feel, and I hope it's shared by disabled people themselves, like the participation of disabled people and DPOs resulting in a strategy that truly reflects what disabled people themselves see as the issues. Willing to be challenged on that, absolutely, but I suppose that's the aim we're going for. Key to it is the ongoing engagement with DPOs and disabled people as part of the National Housing Strategy. Then I suppose, just looking beyond your normal communication channels and making sure that you have technology that allows people to participate. That was a key aspect of it, and we're learning all the time in that space. So I suppose people will be interested in what is happening now. So in terms of strategic activity, there's strategic planning at a local level. Housing and disability steering groups have set out their local strategic plans, and these are to account for how are you going to carry out the actions under the implementation plan. And I hope that the structure of the HDSG, it's a multi-stakeholder group with the involvement of people with lived experience, allows that kind of strategic plan to be workable, and also to put people under the right amount of pressure. There's obviously a massive part of the strategy is collaboration between housing and health. And that, the HDSGs, I suppose one of the most important aspects of them that's emerging and is bedded down in certain areas, there's improvements to be made in others, is subgroups between HSE and local authority, where housing allocations can be properly considered, and those groups report back into the HDSG. That's crucially important. There's no use in having a group that's isolated and isn't working through to the right governance structures. Another relatively new structure is regional interagency groups. Those are the HSE and local authority, and that's to a large extent about working through the various protocols and arrangements and shared understandings that need to happen as far as housing and health go. I mentioned it already, but there's a review of the implementation plan in Q4 2024. That's crucially important. It's to make sure that the implementation plan actions are still appropriate, fit for purpose, and that they're going to achieve what they set out to achieve. In terms of accountability, there's quarterly reporting against the progress against the actions, and that's fed into the National Implementation Steering Group. And again, that's there to ensure that we're actually making the progress we need to make. And I suppose, again, it applies that reasonable amount of pressure on people to make sure that they are following the plan. Mentioned it already, but it's key to it, as I said, disabled people being involved in groups locally. So the ILMI are represented on a lot of HDSGs amongst other DPOs. There's service providers on those groups, there's approved housing bodies, there's local authorities, there's the HSE. So you have all the right people in the room. There's still work to do on the HDSG structure. Some work better than others, there's no getting away from that. As far as inclusion and engagement goes, like one of the things we're working on at the moment is peer support models in the housing agency, and we've put a paper in front of the NISG which kind of develops that out. And look, there's plenty of experience from peer support models that we can use and transpose into the area, and again, it's just a crucially important aspect. Another key aspect of the strategy is information and communications. And I suppose providing people with the right information in the right format, in the right place is crucial. So the Housing Agency, we issued an information and communications strategy, and essentially that's a guidance document on accessible information, and how to manage your information, how to communicate with people, and it's essentially a roadmap. We've just recently developed a website, homeandsupportshub.ie. It'll be launched by the Minister on Monday. And the idea behind that, I suppose, it's come from feedback we've gotten from disabled people about, how do you navigate a very kind of a complex system of housing and health supports. So what this website aims to do is to bring all of that together into one place for people. It's relatively new. Please do go and have a look at it and give us any feedback. it would be much appreciated. Maeve mentioned it earlier, there's no getting away from the fact that getting on a housing list and being allocated a house, there's an enormous gap between the two things. So we recently ran an awareness campaign, and the idea behind the campaign was to encourage people to engage with housing and health supports at the earliest possible opportunity. So in other words, get yourself on a housing list if you qualify for it. And I suppose that was targeted at people who would qualify for social housing. I'll just give a quick sample of some of the research and advisory work that we're doing in the Housing Agency at the moment. You can see it there, 1.1.9, that's a key piece for me at least. Reporting on what delivery mechanisms are being used, what's the most appropriate, and where do we need to go with that. 1.3.1 is crucially important as well. It's on us to look at city and county development plans and find out how much that addresses housing accessibility and accessibility more generally. 1.3.2 is about examining good practice housing projects. I was speaking to James briefly beforehand. We need to there's no doubt we need to move away from the kind of congregated setting arrangement, and I think that's why it's really important for the likes of Clúid, who are big developing AHBs, to be wrapping in disabled suitable housing into their own housing programmes. I mentioned it already, but interagency collaboration is a crucial part of this strategy. The HSE working together with local authorities, AHBs working with local authorities, service providers working with one another, and most importantly, listening to disabled people. I suppose in terms of what the Housing Agency does, to a large extent there's 3 government departments involved in the strategy, and we fulfil a kind of an honest broker role with that. I suppose we're involved in all of the different groups that sit under the strategy. So we're part of the National Implementation Plan, we sit on all 30 HDSGs, and then we chair 9 regional interagency groups, which is that HSE local authority piece. I'll leave it there. Thanks very much, everyone.
Our final speaker of the evening is Nicola Ryan. So Nicola is co-director of Studio Red Architects and a Grade 2 conservation architect. She has a special interest in inclusive housing solutions, development of existing buildings, infill plots, backland sites in established communities. I think good design is obviously really important when it comes to providing housing for disabled people that actually works for them. So we're really pleased Nicola's here with us this evening. So Nicola, take it away. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. It's a great honour to be here, and many thanks to Clúid for having me. And lovely to hear the words from Anna on the late Simon. So here goes. I'm going to run through a couple of examples of housing projects that we have either completed or have on the drawing board at the moment. And I am just one of a team, so we have Dara, Grania, myself, Claire, and the lovely Alana is out there as well. So all of these are very much a group effort. I'm just the sucker who got the short straw to come up and talk about them. And I suppose our manifesto, if you will, in the office is that architecture is about making spaces to improve lives, and that architecture should enable rather than disable. So why do we need universal design homes? The latest CSO figures show that 27.5% of Irish households have at least one person with a disability living in them, and that many disabilities are acquired over a lifetime, and really we need to be thinking about our future selves. I suppose in our experience, what we have found is that really with quite small design decisions made, you can make a really big impact to the lives of the people who are using the building. So in this talk, I'm going to run through 4 projects as quickly as I can. The first one is a co-housing project that myself and Grania, my business partner, undertook in Chapel Izzard. The second is 2 Universal Design Plus apartments in Killaloo for a private client. The third is a age-in-place house and studios, also in Killaloe. I absolutely love the M7, and exit 14 is my favourite stop along there. And the fourth is a reuse of a famine building in the colony of Dugort. I don't know if there's a Mayo man here can tell me am I pronouncing that properly. Dugort, thank you. Dugort in Achill Island in Mayo. So we'll jump into the Chapel Izzard one. So myself and my husband have 3 children, and we found ourselves really priced out at the Dublin housing market. We rented for many years a 3-bed semi, very nice house, but it was totally unsuitable for our family needs. And myself and Grania came across this funky little site, and it's right at Chapel Izzard Village. Some of you might know that's down towards Cunningham Road, and the Phoenix Park is up here. And there was an existing building on the site, and it was a factory. It boasted 600 square metres of asbestos. Nobody else wanted it, but myself and Grania jumped in and went for it. It actually was originally built as a cinema in the 1950s, but didn't seem to commercially make sense. So the really good thing about this site is it's located close to all the services. There's the bus stop, there's the school, there's Park Lane Deli. We'll recommend the matches there. And there's a shop, there's a post office, there's a series of pubs. So it's a nice spot. And then, of course, we've got the absolute loveliness of the Phoenix Park right beside us. So, and I think a number of the speakers have touched on this about the importance of knowing your brief and knowing who you're designing for. And I suppose it was a great privilege being able to design my own house for the needs of my family. That's us there. This is the stillest my family has ever been. My husband, Pedro. That's Tommy, our gorgeous son. He's now 15. There's me. There's a menagerie of pets. That's Nina strangling a puppy, and Lana is the gymnast amongst us. But I suppose if I can focus on Tommy for a little while, he has the most magnificent crop of curls, as you can see. He also has an extremely rare syndrome, and that entails diagnoses of autism, epilepsy, intellectual disability, gait issues, gastrointestinal issues. He's non-verbal, and he has a lot of challenging behaviours. So life is very complex for Tommy, and I suppose as a result for his family members too. And he is the bravest, funniest, and cheekiest little lad you could meet. Big lad, actually, in fact, now. So I suppose, again, like that absolute privilege of knowing my own brief and knowing what we needed right now and what we would possibly need in the future. And when I got to really consider what it was that Tommy would need from a house, I needed to think about his sensory system, because it's very dysregulated, and it's something that he's seeking to calm himself all the time. Tommy's hyperkinetic, so he's on the move from the moment he gets up in the morning until he's medicated to go to bed at night and to hopefully sleep. He's extremely sensory seeking, so he's always looking to touch, to feel, to chew, to taste. He's a very unusual response to pain, so that he may not cry or shout or scream. He actually might laugh or possibly even look like he enjoys the sensation. And he's very thrill-seeking. And with those things combined, he really requires a lot of vigilance in order for him to be safe. Okay, so he's always exploring things, often things that you mightn't want him to be exploring. And he is very fondly known as Tom the Bomb in our house. Okay. So just to go back to the site, so the site is kind of up a funky little lane, and then we were able to split the back of the site. So it's a backland site. The back wall is the Phoenix Park Wall, National Monument, and then you can see the proximity of the park there. So the park is northeast of the site. There's the pub. So we were able to, with careful planning, we were able to distribute 3 new dwellings on the site. And our family home is number 3. Grania's in number 1, we're in number 3. We don't spend enough time together in the office, so we thought we should live beside each other then. So.
But actually, in pooling resources and in undertaking the project together, it enabled us to be able to build the houses. So this is our house, and it's very contemporary and pared back, and was done very much on a budget. You'll see the kitchen, dining, living is located to the southwest of the ground floor plan. There's den, which can double as a ground floor bedroom for whenever we might need that. There's an adjacent shower room. There's a laundry room out to the rear. And then you come up a set of steps to some quiet spaces at first floor. So they actually have the lovely view out over the park, which you'll see in a little while. And then we've got 3 further bedrooms and a family bathroom there. So just some of the measures there that we've undertaken is that because Tommy moves a lot, we've given him the space to move. So that, and we've underfloor heating, so there's no radiators to crash into, and he can move up and down, round and about. And that's very much part of our family living arrangement then. You enter the house along a sensory path. So I'm not the greatest gardener, but there are some nice lavenders, rosemaries, grasses. We're in stiff competition with the gardener number 1, where Grania is, because she is actually very good. So you come through a sheltered courtyard space, and then into in under a soffit area here, so you get a sense of enclosure as you're coming in from the busy world, and then into a generous entrance hall. And I suppose in any of these cases, you'll see that if we can give a little bit of generosity to circulation spaces, it makes the world a difference for all users. So that courtyard space also doubles as a kind of a safe external space. All of the living spaces look onto it. And we are dealing with challenging behaviours. I have 2 little girls, we need to keep them safe. So there are kind of shutdown zones where the girls can run upstairs, and we can help Tommy to calm, using outdoor space, using water, using activity. And then, again, nice generous space for circulation. As somebody who has autism, Tommy can struggle with transitions from one place to another. And oftentimes it is that circulation space that we can have that difficulty, that challenging behaviours can flare, that he can become overwhelmed. So actually just having a width and a generosity to those circulation spaces is really important in being able to manage that. At the bathroom then, Tommy absolutely loves water. It's actually part of his syndrome that he has a fascination with it. And so he takes many baths. And we don't have an immersion, but it is on. The hot water is on all the time. Yeah. Modern day immersion. But over the bath is positioned a roof light. Again, just a really simple design measure, but it's a way of Tommy connecting with the sky, with the nature, watching clouds move overhead while he can be still in the bath. So these are some of photographs of the house. So that's the curved sensory path. You can run your hand through the grasses there. Some of those have died now since, to be honest. This is the courtyard. This is the courtyard that you come into. The cat's really enjoying himself there. Tommy loves that box hedging. He loves pressing his hands against it and that feedback that he gets. There's a little water feature here. Again, everything is looking out onto that. This is our entrance door in. So there's a little sense of cover there. So again, you're breaking down the scale as you're coming from this outer world into your safe space and into your house. This is our entrance hallway. Tommy is an avid climber, and combined with epilepsy, it's just an absolutely lethal setup. So we used timber fins that run from the ground all the way up to the first floor ceiling so that no climbing is possible. We've had a couple of A&E trips from falling off banisters and things from the old house. And then that's our open plan area. It's very pared back. Tommy doesn't like visual clutter. We have a big island unit. His pacing space doesn't run through the working space of the kitchen. We've got a series of tall units that can close over, so things like kettles and knives and things can be very easily shut away. And also, when you have people coming over, you can shove things in there and close the doors. It's really, really useful for all. Those are the fins on the stairs there.
This is Tommy's sensory room. We've changed up the material on the floor here, so it's an indicator that this is a different type of space. So again, the building is feeding information to Tommy about and his sensory system. And it just magically, this was not by design, managed to frame the pine tree in the Phoenix Park to the rear. So we've got this lovely kind of canopy view out the back. And that's Tommy's sensory room then lit up with all various light tubes and things. And then again, just talking about that kind of connection with nature. So Tommy loves the bath, the roof lights above. He gets to sit in there, watch the stars, watch the clouds go by, splash and flood as much as he can. And then this is our first floor sitting room with a view out to the Phoenix Park canopy. You get to watch squirrels and foxes and deer and beautiful birds. And sitting in that chair for 5 minutes is a very restorative thing to do. You're all welcome to come and try it out. So the second project is, it's actually holiday accommodation, and it's been built by private clients in the town of Killaloe. This family have a child who is a full-time wheelchair user, and when she was young, it didn't seem to be as much of an issue for taking trips or going away, but as she's become older and the type of equipment has changed, they have found that they just don't go on holidays anymore. They live very close to Killaloe, so this is a very selfless project that they're providing. They are going to build this holiday accommodation, UD+, 2 apartments, UD+, right in the centre of the town. So this is an old photograph, and it's very beautiful. It's Church Lane. This gorgeous view framed of the cathedral down the bottom of it. And these are the 2 buildings here. So again, we're knitting into an existing community. You've got facilities on your doorstep, and that proximity thing of not having to get in a car every time you have to go somewhere. That's the site there. So there's there's a shop and a small house there, and then this big backland site, which is, you're going to hear that phrase a lot, and then there's a small little laneway that links out to John Street. So the site is actually quite tricky because it's very sloping, and we have actually been able to use that to our benefit. So the 2 terraced dwellings are left on Church Street, and then we have developed to the rear a 2-storey dwelling, or 2-storey apartments, and you'll see we're kind of using similar volumes to what is there already to help it knit into the community. And then the laneway here, I'll tell you a little bit more about. So that's the plan there. It's the ground floor plan on the street. The clients are going to provide a changing place bathroom for the town of Killaloe, which is a very welcome addition. And then we have 2 apartments. The ground floor apartment is accessed from Church Lane, and then the first floor apartment, we've been able to do away with the need for steps or stairs, is entered from John Street because it's a whole level above. So we were able to use the sloping site to our advantage. And again, just some of those measures. So we have achieved 2.4 metre turning circles, which should facilitate nearly all types of wheelchairs. We've set up, this design was very much developed along, holding hands with an occupational therapist that was really useful for us. We have a series of courtyard spaces, external courtyard spaces, to ensure everything is well lit, and little moments of joy where you can pull up or sit and watch the birds or enjoy nature. And then first floor, again, entered from above, from that top level, and 2 bedrooms. Things like hoist positions and everything have already been thought through before we go for planning. And there's a couple of visuals there. So again, just kind of knitting into the type of volumes that are already in the town, so it gives that nice kind of sense of place. And that's a section there, shows that sloping site. So that's the laneway, and that's Church Street there. Again. Okay, and I know I'm running out of time, I'm really sorry, so I'm going to go as fast as I can, and some more visuals. There we go. So next one is in Killaloe. So we have converted a derelict stables building to 4. This is the before photo, just in case you're worried. We
we've converted it to 4 artist studios with shared circulation zone, and then a backland, again, site to the rear. We have developed a single-storey dwelling for the clients as their long-term living solution. So again, there's the studios there, and you come in, there's kind of a semi-private area. You come into a more private zone here. And then the absolute joy of this is that the River Shannon runs along here. So again, those nice generosity of circulation spaces, and considering how the couple's needs may change in the future. So there's an adaptability piece here. Okay, and there's the stables. We've popped up the roof to get a first floor in. It made it commercially viable, and the single-storey dwelling to the rear. And that's it from the other side of the river. So we've knitted in using the local stone that you see here, and this is our volume here. The stables, and one of our clients is an artist, so she uses one of them. And yeah, you can see, I mean, it's just absolutely gorgeous views out the back, and the 2 little doggos. Last one, I'm going to spend 30 seconds. This is one of my favourite ones. So this is the colony building in Achill. We think that it was used as a poorhouse to house the local Catholic kids who were taken in, fed, indoctrinated, and then shipped off to America. It was more recently run as a guest house. It was then vacant for very many years, and it has had a lot of alterations done to it in the past. So our client is an autism support worker. This is a private development that she's going to undertake. That's the building up there. This is it here. So we've got South Light to the rear. Again, it's knitting into this little community. And Dee is the client's name, and she would like to run this house as a supported holiday home for children with autism and their families, and she would be their support worker. This, again, is an existing photo. So the old guest house had a lot of commercial kitchens and lots of flat roofs out the back. They're all to be taken away. We then have a nice southwest courtyard that everybody enters through together, and we've kind of pared back to the basics of the volume. So in terms of the plan, it's very long, linear and narrow, which is good for daylight. And then we've tried to sort of zone it so that, again, it can be adaptable. So there's the main kitchen dining area with living off of that, a kind of more separate sitting space. But things can be zoned off. There's really good vigilance out to that protected southwest courtyard out the back. The dining room we've used as a kind of a central light void because that's getting your southwest light. The ceilings generally are quite low, so it just gives a little bit of a lift to the sensory system as you come through there. And then the ground floor den space can convert to a ground floor bedroom with adjacent shower room if required. Okay, so and that's that. So just, sorry, I know I've run over time. Thank you for bearing with me. Again, you know, that key thing is that architecture is about making spaces to improve lives, and he's my why. Okay, thank you.
So just in terms of kind of the basic one, how important is it that we consider disability when it comes to housing in Ireland? So I'll let anyone kick off first. How important is it that we consider disability when it comes to housing in Ireland?
It's crucial. Sorry, I'm thinking of my dinner.
It is, yeah.
Was it? I'm thinking of my dinner now. Not just that, but I was thinking of Supermax. Anyway, sorry, I'm digressing, but I think it's crucial. I mean, it's not, you see, all right, if you look at Finland solved its housing problem by building houses. That's what they did in the 70s. I used to live in Finland. But you can't do that with disability. You can't just build houses, you have to build services around them. But at the start of it means just having accessible homes, you know, build them for, I mean, part of the whole building policy needs to be reassessed from the National Disability Authority. And again, Part M needs to be reassessed. Universal design needs to be reassessed. It's outdated, it's cumbersome. Make it simpler, make it more accessible. Not just have housing visitable, but they have to be livable. We're an aging population, you know, that's going to happen. And it's life stages. So it is crucial. I mean, it doesn't have to be overly complex or nebulous. It can be pared back and it can be simple. And again, we're never going to solve everything. Like every need's not going to be met. But the basic canvas can be, and the polish can be added too. in many ways.
Thanks very much, James. Do you want to pass it along? I think Carolyn might want to jump in. Yeah, it's okay. Yeah.
I absolutely agree. And I think we have to pare back to the very basic of who is going to live in this home. That has to be the very first question. I know that approved housing bodies are having issues with councils, only telling them last minute who their tenant is going to be. And then you try to move into a house and it just doesn't work. And it's a terrible shame. You know, you live in the most fabulous, beautiful little bungalow like I do. And yet, a lot of stuff I just couldn't do in it. And bear in mind that we're an aging population. As we age, more and more of us will develop disabilities. And also there's the issue that people who had disabilities earlier in their lives and continue to have are now aging in a way that we weren't even 30 years ago. So now organisations like councils, like approved housing bodies, have to consider you're going to have disabled tenants before they even get the disabilities of age. And until that's recognised and worked on, I think we'll always struggle. But how important is it? It's absolutely essential.
Thanks very much, Carolyn. Yeah, and I suppose this is, yeah, you probably won't be able to pick one thing, but if you could wave a magic wand, what thing would you change regarding disability, access, inclusion and housing in Ireland tomorrow? So, anyone wants to jump in there?
Can I say something?
You can indeed, yeah.
I live beside Carolyn. It's a fluid development of 40 houses, 17 on one side, 23 on the other. Now, as Carolyn said, the houses are beautiful, but South Dublin Council in recommending South Dublin Council in recommending to Fluid lost the OT's description of what the end user would want. And in my own case, I have back garden that I can't access, and I love the garden. Carolyn doesn't, but I do. And I have a gorgeous garden, and I can't access it because Fluid Management came out, assessed it, said it's normal standards, but I have to go out backwards, but I can't get back in. And even the hall door, as Carolyn knows, I have to go out on a mobility. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm going to turn off that. I can't go out on this. I can go out on the scooter. I can transfer, but as my partner's away at the moment, Carolyn is the person who comes and locks my door. Simple things, and even in the wheelchair, you have to go out backwards, and I can't close the door. So what's the point in having a house that you can't use? And it's a beautiful house, beautiful, and lovely neighbours, a lovely area.
Yeah.
You're in a trap.
Yeah, I suppose that feeds into what we were saying earlier, you know, you don't just stop at delivering the housing and walk away. So, Carolyn, did you want to?
Sorry,
yeah.
Somebody else. Yeah. As Deirdre said there, that's an issue for a lot of us. But Deirdre wants a nice garden. I want a few tons of concrete. So there's where we differ. So.
Yeah, we just have a question there. Yeah.
First of all, I'm clear that I'm not in good in English, but I come here, I attend the seminar, and I know that they consider the autism as a disability. My son has autism. When I applied for a home, the county council sent a letter and they say autism is not a disability. And then after 2 years, I have disabled. I have a backbone surgery, but it's not successful. I have a mobility problem, and I can't go up and down on the stairs. And then we apply second time, they again reject. And then say go to the occupational therapist and make a report and send us, then we will do something. We made this thing. After occupational therapist report, they say we approve and we will give you 1 more bedroom for your autism son. But now when we will going there and say how much time, they say after approval, it's also a long list. We can't give you a time frame when they will offer a house. And my son is now autism. Most of his thing is a behavior problem. When actually my brother-in-law live here, they have bought their own home because they both persons working. And when we visit my kids to their home, when they come back, they are upset. They say they have home, why we are not home? And we are 5 people in 2-bedroom homes. And it's very difficult. In 1 bedroom, my daughter sleep on floor. In our bedroom, my little fella sleep on floor. Because my autism son not want to share the bed. Because first I decide one day 1 child sleep on bed and 1 on mattress on floor. But the autism ones not accept the change. Big fight. And for the sake of my daughter, sometimes my husband stay in their bedroom. When my son sleep, then he come back. And then sometimes we went pick our daughter and put his mattress on floor after this situation. And the situation is that they say we have no time frame. And they say maybe you have wait for 10 years. And after 10 years is a normal time. We ask questions. Some people who offer the home and they move in from our locality. And some other thing, where we live, the kids when go outside for playing, some other kids throw their toys in the bin. 2 days ago, I bought a new scooty for my little son. And when they come back, I say, where's your scooty? They say, Mama, I found, but I can't find anywhere. Then my daughter go to the bin and say, Mama, it is inside the bin. And sometimes there's drugs injections nearby the bins. In this situation, how I can survive and how I can live.
Thanks very much. And I think you've just kind of demonstrated, we're in a housing crisis, but those issues are magnified when you have, obviously, people with disabilities. So I might open it to further questions or comments. I know we're running a bit over time, so we'll get them in before I launch into more questions myself. Yeah. So is there a hand at the back there?
Hi. So just listening through this whole lecture, as an autistic person myself, I'm finding that it was really insightful to see how we as a society can actually adapt to bring in housing that's more accessible for disabled people across the country. But my question would be for the panel, if anyone can answer it. For my mum, she's my carer, and for her, it's kind of challenging for her to have myself and my brothers who are also on the spectrum living in the same house. And so we were having a recent conversation about either being put on the housing list or being made as tenants for the current house that we're living in. But my question would be, would you know if there were any supports that carers of disabled adults might have should they consider independent living or accessing housing in the near future?
What, me? Oh, sorry, I was going to give it to Pat because he works for the Housing Authority. I do mean supports. I mean, you can... To get it, you have to apply for housing first. That's the first thing you have to do. You have to get onto the council house. So if you go to the Housing Authority's website, what was Housing Support Hub? Yeah, that will give you a go through about how you actually apply for housing in easy read formats. And once you apply for housing, there's a whole centre of supports that will work around that. But the main thing you have to do is you have to apply for housing. You have to apply. You have to apply through your local authority. I think there's 31 of them. Is there 30? 31 of them in the country. You have to apply for that. And then that happens, everything else will flow from that. But I'm not too sure about actual supports for people who are supporting them. There is also the Housing Adaptation Grant, but again, that's one you'll apply to the local authority as well about. I think that's worth 30 grand. I'm not too sure exactly. There is overhaul about that too. And that could be anything. That could be making bedrooms downstairs or whatever your specific requirements are to that. But the main focus for that, and I know it's probably a little comfort, is to apply for housing. The website that the Housing Authority have done is really good. It's really good. It's really done very well. It's elegant. It's easy to navigate. I definitely try and have a look at that. Or even the one that I put up there, the Isle of My one, they will have links to the housing other websites as well.
Thanks, James.
Just a quick comment there. By applying, do apply. You've nothing to lose and you've absolutely everything to gain. You only get one life. It's yours. Go for it.
Well said, Carolyn. And thanks for that, James. Any other questions for the panel?
Yeah, when houses are being designed, that the architects who designed them, my own daughter's an architect, she could do the snag list and all that. But the end user, the architect and in this case is Clan Housing and Fluid and the council. They should all know who the end user is and exactly what their requirements is. Carolyn and I have a mutual friend who's a councillor, and only for him, I don't know what I'd have done, because 10 years on the list, living upstairs and needing something. The end user, the architect, everybody together, and then design the house for that person with the OT's recommendations.
Yeah, thanks, Deirdre. I might actually just bring in Claire Daly. So Claire has direct experience, frontline experience of dealing with this kind of issue. Deirdre, so yeah, Claire, if you want to just say just a bit on just how important it is for AHBs and local authorities to engage at an as early stage as possible to design the correct unit. Yeah.
Thank you. I suppose what I experience on the front line in terms of allocation is like a missed opportunity for AHBs to design properties for people with disabilities. And I suppose like we take in hundreds of thousands of units a year that are built from scratch, and there is dots not being joined where the end user can have a voice at the design stage. And I suppose as a housing officer, my role would be to go to the local authority and ask for names for these properties that are already designed and built. And I know the properties, and the local authority, they know the families, they know the lists. And we need to get together that I know the people on the lists and that the local authorities know the properties better, so that we can involve the end user at an earlier stage. So I suppose that happens for new builds, but it also happens with casual relets that we have. So we may have some that are ground floor and ideal for somebody who has issues with accessibility or can't use the stairs. And as a housing officer, we'll always put that into our request to the council for a name, but we don't always get back somebody who needs the ground floor. We get somebody who may be able to walk upstairs or doesn't have any additional needs, and it seems like such a missed opportunity and something that really should be revisited and made better.
Brilliant, thanks very much, Claire. Carolyn, do you want to?
Do you mind if I
work way by you?
Yeah, look, I suppose it's just to own the fact that there are 31 local authorities across the country with 31 allocation schemes, And I'm not going to defend them that they're a perfect kind of an article or anything like that. They're just not. But I suppose just to highlight that the Housing Agency issued assessment and allocation guidelines a number of years ago. We'll be doing that again in Q1 2025, and I'd encourage anybody who'd like to engage with us in that process, because that's crucial. It's about guiding local authorities in a particular way. And just to say, like, I've spoken to local authorities who are incredibly frustrated with the way their allocation scheme is set up, because it simply doesn't cater for disabled people in the right way. But ultimately, there's councillor involvement in it and all that kind of thing. So it's just important for people to understand that. But those assessment and allocation guidelines can be quite effective.
Yeah, and we fed into those alongside James and ILMI. So, yeah, thanks for mentioning
knowing
that.
your end user, just a point I would make. Many years ago, many moons ago, I was a family carer. I cared for my late mum, Elsie, who had kidney failure and Parkinson's disease. Yes, one wheelchair user caring for another. It was character building. But I won't say the words I would usually use, but I'm sure you can guess. I'm from Tala. What do you expect? Anyway, many years ago, we were in a 2-story, regular mid-terraced house. And the plan was either to extend that house, put in bedrooms, bathrooms, and as at that time, the council didn't like doing that because it was a mid-terrace and narrow, which I understand. It's fire risk as well, I can understand that. So we were offered 2 choices. Would we like to have the council, while they were doing infill housing anyway, build a 3-bedroom, wheelchair-accessible bungalow for us both? 1 bedroom for me, 1 for mum, and 1 for equipment and supplies that both of us would need a lot of. Or would we like to be moved to an end house somewhere and they'd extend that? So we chose the bungalow option. It was a huge bungalow, family-sized. But one of the great things, and I'm going back to, pardon me, 2004, we're talking about consultation. Once that decision was made that we were going for a bungalow, it couldn't have been 48 hours later. We had an architect from South Dublin County Council call us and say, right, would you like to collaborate with us on this? Would you like your OT to do it? Or do you want it to be a joint thing? And the second thing was, he said, I need to pop up to you sometime today. He brought a plan of the proposed house. Now, that was an absolute godsend, because things that matter could be planned from the very outset. How high the sockets are, the electric sockets. My sockets in my new house are down here. They're too low. 1 metre high is perfect. Taps, they could build in the lever taps. Silly, small things. They were able to tell us the floor space of the rooms, how high the windows were off the floor, what size they were. So it took a lot of the stress out of it, because I knew in advance, right, I need to go and buy blinds, I need to go and buy curtains, I can do that now. I need to get the floor, I'll know what the handles are. It took so much stress. Fast forward, I knew nothing about this house until I actually stuck my nose into it. Now, I know you can't allow people onto construction sites. I get that. I wouldn't want to put a wheel on them anyway. I'm too cowardly. But, you can actually give us some information. It doesn't need to be huge, but a little bit of information is really helpful. And things like asking us where we need things like electric sockets. My shower I couldn't use independently because the shower controls were really fiddly. For 7 months, I couldn't have a shower without ringing my carer, Lena, or her husband, or her daughter, or her son, to say, can you come over and turn my shower on for me? I am a 60-year-old woman. Surely to God, I should have the dignity of being able to have a shower. thankfully, it was sorted out, by the way, 2 weeks ago. I now have a lever shower and a proper height toilet. Again, that was something that meant an awful lot. And it could have been sorted out in the very beginning. I would have paid for the blasted thing to be done myself if I knew it had to be done. It would really help. Just a little bit of consultation would really help.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks very much, Carolyn. Thank you. Yeah, and I suppose it just shows the importance of AHBs have great intentions, local authorities have great intentions, government has great intentions, and it's just about exactly. So that's really ringing through. Yeah, that's I know. I was thinking the same. Okay, so we might just take one final question, and then we might wrap it up. And if no one has a final question, I'll ask the final question. Okay, there's just one from the back there. Yeah.
I suppose the final question for the evening would be for any disabled adult who is considering applying for housing and they are gone to the stage where they're trying to get the paperwork sorted, and they've got the option of whether they want to have someone else move into the house with them as part of their independent living, like a personal assistant, for example. Would there be enough supports or resources in place to allow for us to make that decision, knowing that it's to benefit us to enhance our independent living? And as well, would it be possible for the supports that the local authorities have currently in place to be converted into easy to read, so that all the disabled people who are looking to apply for housing can actually see what are the right steps towards getting access to housing?
Thanks very much. I might ask Pat to come in on that one. Yeah.
Yeah, so look, just to, I suppose, first thing on the information side of things, as James mentioned earlier, like I would really, really encourage you to have a look at homeandsupportshub.ie. It doesn't only cover your housing piece, it also covers as best we possibly can the supports piece from the HSE. So I really would encourage you to look at that. In terms of easy to read, like there are some easy to read documents out there. The Housing Agency, our Disability Services team, are working through as many as we possibly can, starting with the most relevant, I suppose, but we haven't covered everything. And I think what we need to do, in fact, there's no I think about it, it can't be the Housing Agency constantly producing these easy to read guides, and it's taking that job off of local authorities or anyone else. We need to get people to start writing in that way. That's the way forward, not that we have to, make a special provision. There's no reason why everybody can understand and easy to read. Why isn't everything written that way? I mentioned allocation schemes a second ago. Every local authority is supposed to publish an allocation scheme. I would challenge anyone in this room, a housing worker or otherwise, to get their head around allocation schemes. And that's the key thing that's of concern to people. So obviously we've a lot of road to run in all of that.
Thanks very much, Pat. And I think that demonstrates, again, a kind of a common theme of the lecture, that it's kind of only, every little helps, and, we all need to work together, but with, of course, a focus on the state, but, the steps that we can all take with regard to making society really inclusive for disabled people is really important. So we might wrap it up there, guys, because I know we're a bit over time. There is some wine left, I believe, at the outside the room. So if you'd like to have a chat and discuss the lecture, but just to say thank you so much for coming tonight. We really appreciated your time and your engagement and your interest in it. And I suppose we've really enjoyed kind of celebrating the legacy and the memory of Simon. We picked this venue because we felt it would be fitting of Simon's love for the arts and culture, as Eileen said. So I hope you enjoyed it too. So safe home, guys. Thanks so much.